What's going on, guys? This is Josh. Welcome to Treksplained. Here I drink and do episode summaries and talk about Star Trek in general. Please like and subscribe after the video if you enjoy it. Now, without further ado, let me explain something to you. Threshold begins with Tom Paris sitting in the pilot's seat of a shuttlecraft. He appears to be pushing some new engines in an attempt to reach Warp 10. They call this transwarp. But he explodes as he approaches the threshold. Ha! Name of the episode. He doesn't really explode though, as it's revealed he's sitting on a holodeck. B'Elanna Torres says simply, "You're dead," and then the opening credits roll. Next scene, Paris, Torres, and Harry Kim are sitting in the mess hall trying to figure out how to fix what went wrong. Neelix freshens up their coffees and says he can help, but doesn't know anything about what they're talking about. But he's a quick study, so everything's fine. Harry tries to tell Neelix it would take too long to explain these subjects to him, and Neelix counters by saying, "What, you don't think I'm smart enough?" "Pretty much, Neelix. Pretty much." But they humor him and tell him they're trying to break the Warp 10 barrier. Current thoughts being that nothing can go faster than Warp 10. Of course, there have always been such theories. You may not know this, but at one point, people thought steam locomotives were going to go so fast that the human body would be crushed, especially women. It was believed for a time that a woman's uterus would go flying out of their bodies if they went faster than 50 miles per hour. Of course, we look back on that now and think how stupid people were, but it was a widely believed fact back in the early 1800s. Point being, there are always speed barriers, and people always find a way to break them. Back to the episode. They stated that, theoretically, Warp 10 would be infinite velocity. You would be everywhere in the universe at once. You could blink in and out of one place in the universe, and come back to another point in the universe instantly. The only reason they're playing with the idea now is because they found a new type of dilithium, which remains stable at a higher warp frequency than the more typical dilithium. Dilithium crystals being what controls the matter-antimatter reaction in a Federation warp drive. I might start branching out into technologies in my future videos and cover warp drive in the future. The shuttle keeps exploding, so you don't know what to stabilize it with. Neelix states a problem he once had in a dark matter nebula, and this causes Paris to think of something. What if the nacelles weren't being torn from the ship? What if the ship is being torn from the nacelles? They tell Neelix he's a genius and then head out to test the new theory. Now in the holodeck again, Paris is able to achieve Warp 10. They show the video to Captain Janeway and Commander Chakotay. They go over their plan for a real shuttle flight, and Janeway gives the approval. Says that Paris may join an esteemed list of other pilots like Orville Wright, Neil Armstrong, and Zefram Cochrane. Wright and Armstrong you should know from American history, but as for Cochrane, he's the fictional character in the Star Trek mythos who invented warp drive on Earth in the mid-2100s. Now, in his bathroom in his quarters, Paris answers the door and sees Captain Janeway. It seems the doctor suggested that Ensign Kim does the test flight. It seems Paris has a slight enzymatic imbalance in his cerebellum. He might suffer a brain hemorrhage. 2% chance. Paris argues that he has to do this. Goes into some ramblings about how his dad told him he was special as a kid. Janeway reluctantly agrees. The next day, they all get ready for the flight. Paris launches. He starts his warp flight with Voyager following closely behind him. Everything is going good. Voyager keeps up as far as they can until the transwarp kicks in. Paris outpaces Voyager and achieves Warp 10. He disappears from Voyager's sensors and they appear to lose him. Voyager tries to determine where he went, but suddenly there's a quantum surge off the port bow. Paris returns, but he's not awake. He's beamed to sickbay and the doctor scans him, but he's overall okay. The doctor wakes him up by screaming in his ear. Paris talks about how it was to be at Warp 10. He could see the outside of Voyager, outside of the shuttle, inside Voyager, with the Kazon, with the Klingons, back on Earth, other galaxies. The Doctor says he's glad he had a good time. Paris says he saw that Voyager was looking for him, so he took the new engines offline, and he ended up back where he started. The memories are starting to slip away, though. Torres enters sickbay and states that it was a success. The Doctor is going to run further tests on Paris, and everyone else is going to analyze the sensor logs of the shuttle. In engineering, Janeway and Torres look at all the info the shuttle picked up. It is massive. 5 billion gigaquads. I don't know what a gigaquad is, but it sounds impressive. So it seems Warp 10 is a success, but they're still not sure how to exit transwarp at the specific point they want. They gotta figure that out. In the mess hall, Neelix is serving Paris and Torres a new blend of coffee called Paris Delight, in honor of Paris breaking the Warp 10 barrier. Torres likes the blend, but Paris does not. It's a small thing, but this is a sign of bigger issues to come with Paris. A moment later, he tries to get up and passes out on the floor. He has little veins showing up under the temple of his head. Torres calls for a medical emergency to beam Paris to sickbay, but the transporter room can't lock onto him. His pattern is phasing. Torres calls for an emergency medical team. The medics bring him to sickbay, and the Doctor begins treating him. Seems like he's having an allergic reaction to Neelix's coffee. The Doctor scans him and says he's allergic to the water from the coffee. It seems his whole biochemistry is changing. He's unable to breathe. The Doctor puts a force field around the bed and pumps it full of a different air. This helps Paris. Paris continues to act out. It seems he's dying. The Doctor demands to know more about what happened on the shuttle, and Torres rushes to get the information. Paris looks terrible at this point. Totally gross. He's making his own eulogy. Beloved mutant. Talks about his future funeral. He rambles about people and crying. He asks for a kiss. The Doctor is like, what? Not the Doctor, Kes. But she can't because of the different atmosphere. A few moments later, Paris slips away and apparently dies. Womp womp. The Doctor notes the time of death, and Kes walks over and fulfills Paris' last request of a kiss on the cheek. The Doctor is now working on some paperwork in the middle of the night. He hears some creaking from the other room and walks over to investigate. Paris is alive, but he pulls off some hair. He's still changing. The Doctor does some more scans. Paris' organs are working again, but he also has an extra one. 2 hearts. In a side scene, crewman Jonas contacts the Kazon and sends them the information about the Warp 10 flight. There's an ongoing theme with this guy for a while, the spy on Voyager. Back in sickbay, the Doctor is telling Janeway about the mutations for Paris. He doesn't know what the hell is going on. Janeway goes to talk to Paris. Paris has lost all his hair at this point, and his skin is flaking off. Gross. Paris calls everyone a liar, and that Janeway is just jealous. She tries to leave, but Paris says he's sorry and asks her to come back. His behavior is really erratic. He tries attacking Janeway, but there's a force field in place. Paris taunts her a little more, and then throws up his tongue. Ew. In a future scene in sickbay, the mutation is picking up. Paris demands to be let out of the force field. Says he needs to leave the ship. The Doctor calls Janeway and tells him his idea to cure Paris. They need to bombard his body with antiprotons, which means a trip to the warp core. They go to engineering and set up the proper interface and put Paris in it. He is now looking rather amphibious, and he's in the interface. The Doctor gives directions from sickbay over a monitor. The Doctor is a hologram, by the way, only able to exist in sickbay or the holodeck. This changes later in the series, but for now he's limited in his movement. Torres takes the engines offline and begins the treatment of Paris. So far the treatment isn't working. The Doctor begins making different suggestions, but Torres is distracted by something happening in engineering. The monitor gets shot by a phaser, and the lights begin blinking in and out. Tuvok announces a security alert over the intercom, and the Doctor and Kes just look on, worried. Everyone is searching for him. Janeway is walking to the turbo lift, but sees Paris. Paris attacks her and takes her into a shuttlecraft. They warp out of there just before Voyager regains main power and is able to give chase. The shuttle outpaces them thanks to the transwarp, and Voyager loses them. 3 days later, Voyager picks up the shuttle on sensors. They head there while the Doctor talks to Chakotay and Tuvok about Paris. Apparently, he was evolving into a future human genotype millions of years from now. Transwarp just accelerated the unattractive process. They orbit the planet and find Paris and Janeway, but they are salamanders now, and they have made babies together. The babies escape into a nearby stream, while Janeway and Paris get stunned by a phaser. Back in sickbay, Paris and Janeway are back to normal. They talk about making babies, and Paris apologizes. Janeway says she's going to put in accommodation for Paris anyway, because he did make the first successful transwarp flight, and he was a good lover. Paris says thanks, but it's not other people's opinions that he should care about. It's his own. But that's the end of the episode. That's all for today's episode. Thanks for watching Treksplained. If you liked today's video, please drop a like and subscribe so you get updates on new videos. See you next time on Treksplained.